Hi, welcome you all to this special class on Unacademy YouTube platform, Unlock YouTube platform. Today, as part of special class, we'll be looking at one of the very important topics in our polity governance and Indian administration papers. The topic is related to Parliament. Every year, you can see that a very good number of questions are asked from this topic by UPSC in both the polity governance and Indian administration papers. Before we go into this topic, let us look at first all the courses offered by Unacademy. As you can see it on your screen here, you have this UPSC CSE Mega Compact, wherein you are expected to answer 56 questions in around 60 minutes. This is on 28 November 11 a.m. So that is on coming Sunday. You have this examination. You can win rewards worth 6 crores. 1,000 lucky participants can win awards including the scholarship 100% scholarship for first to 3 rankers, 75% scholarship for 4 to 10 rankers, and 15% scholarship towards the end between 2001 to 3000 ranks. This examination is available in both English and Hindi languages. Then these are all the top rankers of Unacademy this year, including AIR2, then 9, 10, 13, 14, 16, and 20. Between 1 and 10, there are 7 learners. Between 21 and 100, 20 learners. Between 101 and 761, 143 learners, which is a very significant achievement. And what are the batches that are starting? From 24th of this month, that is incidentally from today, they are starting new batches like both for Mission 2022 Comprehensive Batch, course on GS UPSC CSE, and then batches for 2023 also, those who are writing for 2023. Then apart from this, you also have a complete test series to crack this UPSC CSE examination. It not only includes GS combo, but also includes iconic and iconic combo subscriptions. There will be 21 tests for optional and 80 tests for prelims and mains, which is huge number. And this is worth 45,000 rupees. It is free with 1 year and above iconic GS and combo subscriptions, which is very cost effective also. Then you also have what we call this you also have what we call standout, chance to stand out from the crowd with experienced coach. As all of you know, it requires a very experienced coach, either tutor and mentor, to help you to clear this examination. So that is the reason why you have this facility also given to you by Unacademy. You can buy 1 year iconic GS and get 12 months of optional free. These are all other attractive offers on Unacademy platform. And you also have live mentoring program. You need mentors who can help you in terms of your preparation, in terms of personal coaching, in terms of doubt solving, in terms of evaluating your answers, in terms of daily answer writing, and also study booster sessions. These are all available for those who take admission. And you don't have to worry about your finances also, because Unacademy is also providing what is called in a loan facility. 0% processing fee, 0% interest rate. It is approved in 2 hours. There are no hidden charges, and there is minimal paperwork, and there are flexible tenures also. You can get all of them, and you can get all the discounts. Apart from this, you can also use our discount code 10%. You can get more. by applying our code PKS10. You can use the code PKS10 and you will get 10% additional discount apart from the discount that you are getting on an academic platform. So these are all the courses that are offered on an academic platform. Let us come back and look at what we are discussing now, that is Parliament. So this is the topic that we are discussing now, Parliament. As I have mentioned, this is very, very important from your examination point of view, whether it is political governance or Indian administration. Every year, good number of questions are asked. So, what are we discussing here as part of this topic in the next 1 hour or so? What are we discussing? Why did we opt for parliamentary democracy in India? What are the important features of parliamentary democracy in India? What are the problems in the functioning of parliamentary democracy in India in recent times? Then, what can be done to make it effective? Then we will look at all the problems and also look at all the other solutions also. So the question here is that starting with why do we need parliamentary democracy in India? Why did we opt for parliamentary democracy in India? Why? Because at the time of independence we had two important at the time of independence we had two important choices in front of us. One is a presidential form of democracy and the other one is parliamentary democracy. Our constitutional forefathers looked into both presidential as well as parliamentary democracy and ultimately they decided to go with the parliamentary democracy in India. Why? Why? Because in presidential form of democracy, what we have is stability. Take the case of United States of America. Again, these things are there in our political governance, comparison American constitution with Indian constitution. In the presidential form of democracy, if you look at it, in United States of America, the president will be there and he will be there for 4 years. It is almost impossible to impeach the president of America. In the last, if you take 230 years or so, when America opted for this presidential democracy, there is not in a single instance where the president was removed through impeachment. You can understand how stable the presidential democracy was, or it still is. Once, even if the president dies in his office, it is the vice president who becomes the president. So it ensures unprecedented stability there. But the another advantage with presidential democracy is that the president can select his council of advisors, ministers, on his own, and he does not have to make sure that they have to be members of legislature. What we can say here is that the president has more freedom to select his advisors. They don't have to be members of either legislature or executive. They don't have to be members of either legislature or executive. So they don't have to be members of either Congress or Senate. It gives more freedom to the president to select his ministers. This is the advantage of presidential democracy, but the problem with the presidential democracy is that it can result in dictatorship. Our constitutional forefathers looked into these aspects and they realized the fact that there is every possibility that this presidential democracy can automatically lead to what we call dictatorship in India. Because as we can see, there are at the time of independence, what we call it as India was a nascent democracy, and as part of this nascent democracy, there was not much of experience with the democratic systems of governance in India at the time. So what happens here is there is every possibility that we can have a situation wherein a what we can have a situation wherein a charismatic leader becoming the president, and when a charismatic leader becomes president, and since it offers so much of stability, it can result in what we call dictatorship also. That is the reason why our constitutional forefathers have opted for what is called this parliamentary form of democracy. Why? Because they did not want dictatorship to be part of India again, because we suffered in the hands of dictatorship for a period of more than 250 years during the British rule. That is the reason why they have decided that we must have parliamentary democracy. Why? Because in parliamentary democracy, uh, the executive is part of legislature. They come from legislature, and they are accountable to legislature also in parliamentary democracy. For example, once the Prime Minister is sworn in, for the next 5 years, he is continuously accountable to the legislature. How the next 5 years he is continuously accountable to the legislature? For the next 5 years, he is continuously accountable to the legislature through various instruments, which we shall be discussing a little bit later also. And he is accountable to the legislature through this confidence motion, no confidence motion, passing of budgets, and various other instruments. And that is the reason why our constitutional forefathers felt that what India requires is more of a what India requires is more of a accountability than stability. That is offered by presidential democracy, and that is why they have opted for what is called parliamentary form of democracy, because it ensures accountability. But this parliamentary democracy has some kind of weakness also. What is the weakness that we are talking about in the parliamentary democracy? In the parliamentary democracy, the weakness is that it can result in instability. The governments can collapse. For example, between 1989 and 1999, in those 10 years period, we had more than six different governments. We had so many chief ministers, starting with Rajiv Gandhi, late Rajiv Gandhi, then VP Singh, then we had Chandrasekhar, then we had P. Narasimha, then Vajpayee, then we had Devagowda, I.K. Gujral, and again Vajpayee. So you can see so many chief ministers, so much of instability. And in parliamentary democracy, another problem is there is what we call policy paralysis also in administration in parliamentary democracy, because most of the time the prime minister would be spending only on his survival. And what happens because of that? It can result in a situation wherein he does not have much time for governance. It can result in a situation wherein he has to spend more time and focus on ensuring the survival of his government. That can result in what we call policy paralysis in administration. And that is the reason why it is believed that a parliamentary democracy has these weaknesses. In spite of these weaknesses, our constitutional forefathers have opted for parliamentary democracy. They have opted for parliamentary democracy because they gave more importance to accountability than stability. They gave more importance to the accountability offered by the parliamentary democracy than the stability offered by presidential form of democracy. Now, coming to the next question that you can see it on the screen here. What are the important features of this parliamentary democracy in India? What are the important features? As we have mentioned just now, in parliamentary democracy, executive comes from legislature and executive is accountable to legislature. What do we mean by that? It means that in our parliamentary democracy, if you have to be the president of prime minister of the country, if you have to be the cabinet minister, you must be eligible to become the member of parliament. On the other hand, if you are disqualified as a member of parliament, you will automatically lose your prime ministership or even ministership also. For example, in 1975, Allahabad High Court. In 1975, Allahabad High Court had disqualified Indira Gandhi as it has disqualified Indira Gandhi as the member of parliament under Representation of People's Act 1951. When she was disqualified as a member of parliament, obviously she could not have continued as the prime minister of the country also. That is what we say in a parliamentary democracy. Please remember, this is not the case with the presidential form of democracy. In the presidential form of democracy in America, the president and his secretary of state and others, they are not members of either Congress or Senate, and they don't have to be members of Congress and Senate. This is the basic difference that we see here. This is the basic difference we see here. In India, if you have to be a minister, you must be eligible to be a to be to be a member of parliament. Please remember, a similar question was asked this year also in your prelims. At the state level also, if you have to be a minister, you must be eligible to become MLA in that particular state also. Now, let us assume that you are not a member of parliament, either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, and you are made minister. Either, you are not a member of parliament and you are made minister. Then what is the situation? Then you have to get yourself elected within the period of 6 months, either to Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. You have to get yourself elected within a period of 6 months, either to Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. Similarly, at the state level, you have to get yourself elected to the state legislative assembly or a state legislative council, depending on whether the state has a legislative council or not. Recently, sometime back in Maharashtra, there was this situation wherein the chief minister of Maharashtra, who is not a member of either legislative assembly or legislative council, he was about to lose his membership. Finally, the central government had come to the rescue. Election Commission had conducted elections and he could become the member of legislative council. Otherwise, he would have lost his chief ministership also. This is what we say. What we say here is that in a parliamentary democracy, you should be a member of either of the legislature for you to continue as a part of the executive. And then another important feature of this parliamentary democracy is that there is continuous accountability of executive towards legislature. There is very continuous accountability of executive towards legislature. And what are the instruments used by the legislature to ensure accountability of executive? Please remember, all these instruments are asked by UPSC in our prelims examination. What are the instruments used by legislature to control executive? What are the instruments? First and foremost, you talk about question hour, which is the first hour of the functioning of parliament. Then 0 hour, short duration discussions. Then different kinds of motions like adjournment motion, no confidence motion, censure motion, and then cut motions. Then passing of budgets. Then voting on the bills moved by the government on the floor of the house. Then there's other instruments like privileges, privilege motions against the ministers on the floor of the house. So these are all some of the instruments used by legislature to ensure accountability of executive. But the question that we are asking here is that in spite of having so many instruments, in spite of having so much of safeguards, why our parliament is not able to ensure effective control of executive? That is what the question that we have to ask. What are the problems in the functioning of parliament in India in recent times? As I said, every year these problems are repeatedly asked. They are repeatedly asked in our both polity governance as well as Indian administration papers. Let us see what are the problems in the functioning of our parliament. Let us see all of them. And we will also look at, apart from looking at the problems, we will also see what should be done to ensure effective functioning of our parliament. First and foremost is the role of speaker. As we always say, the entire effective functioning of parliament depends only on what we call the role of the speaker. Because speaker is the presiding officer of the house. As the presiding officer of the house, he has absolute powers to run the house. Initially, we have taken this speaker office from British parliamentary democracy only and British parliamentary practices. In the British parliamentary practices, what we can say here is that once a speaker is always a speaker. That is what we say. The speaker, once a person is elected as speaker, what does he do? He will simply resign from the political party to which he belongs to. And he will continue as a speaker. And as long as the members are satisfied with his performance, he will continue as a speaker. He has to ensure impartial and unbiased functioning of the House. He must provide equal opportunities to the opposition parties to raise issues on the floor of the House. He should not be prejudiced against the ruling political party. He should ensure that there is level playing field on the floor of the House. And he should not misuse his powers to benefit the ruling political party. And unfortunately, when you look at the parliament in India, functioning of parliament in India, the basic issue here is that we have inherited all these structures from British parliamentary democracy. The entire parliamentary democracy in India is nothing but an extension of a Whitehall administration. That is British parliamentary democracy. Now, but the problem here is that we have inherited those structures, but not the attitudes, values, and behaviors. In the name of parliamentary democracy in India, we still have what we call it as a democratic feudalism. Those who reach positions of power, those who have majority on the floor of the house, they think that it is their right to control, to dictate, to regulate the affairs of parliament. They believe that they don't have to listen to opposition. They believe that they can ride rough shoulder over the opposition. They believe that they can use the brute majority on the floor of the house to silence opposition on the floor of the house. And those who become the chief ministers, those who become prime ministers, they have little respect for democratic institutions. And they have little respect for democratic traditions and customs. That is where in India parliamentary democracy we say is a failure. Why? Because our leaders simply don't have those democratic values. They don't imbibe democratic traditions. This was not the case initially when Jawaharlal Nehru was the Prime Minister. And the first Speaker of Lok Sabha, Mavlankar, had resigned from Congress Party to ensure impartial functioning of the House. But unfortunately, if we look at the later speakers, especially from the time of Indira Gandhi when she was the Prime Minister, what we have seen is a gradual denigration of the institutions, complete politicization of the office of the Speaker. Speaker acted more like the leader of the follower of the ruling political party on the floor of the House than as the custodian of the House. He would never act, he or she would never act in an impartial, independent manner. They always would come to the rescue of the government. They would always take openly the side of the government on the floor of the House. They don't give enough time to the oppositions. They don't let oppositions to raise the issues on the floor of the House. They will not accept any adjournment motions. When the government does not have majority, they use the Anti-Defection Law to benefit the government by disqualifying all those rebels who have spoken against the government. And this is where parliamentary democracy in India has become a mockery. Why? Because the role of the Speaker. And the ruling political party always knows the value of the Speaker. Normally, the tradition is that the Speaker is always from ruling political party and the Deputy Speaker is from opposition parties. Unfortunately, if you look at in the present Lok Sabha, we don't have any Deputy Speaker also. The government never really bothered to appoint a Deputy Speaker also because they have to give importance to opposition parties. This is the kind of political climate in which we are living in. And we had a speaker, Meera Kumar, in 2014. The government was not in majority. because most of the Congress MPs from Andhra Pradesh revolted against it. They lost majority, and they had introduced no confidence motion against the government. But the Speaker did not allow this no confidence motion on the floor of the House. She kept on coming out with so many excuses for not introducing the no confidence motion. That is how the speakers would play blatantly partisan role. At the state level, the situation is much worse. At the state level, the speakers would openly threaten the rebel MLAs that they would be disqualified if they don't come on to the government side. On the other hand, if opposition MLAs shift their side to the government, they would never take any decision on anti-defection laws. So the basic issue here is the politicization of the office of speaker, and this politicization of the office of speaker meant that there is no possibility of what we call effective functioning of parliament. There is no possibility of this effective functioning of parliament. This is where we have to find a solution. First, let us look at the problems. Then, as usual, we will come up with the solutions. Next, the number of days Parliament is meeting. This is another problem. In 1950s and 1960s, our Parliament used to meet even 150, 160, 180 days also in a year. When Nehru was the Prime Minister, it would discuss and debate all the bills. It would pass them only after a thorough discussion on the floor of the House. Come to last year, Corona year, it met for less than 40 days, 45 days. From 150 days to 45 days. And it never discussed. And the Parliament, the Speaker had suspended the question hour also. And the Speaker had made sure that the government gets all the bills passed on the floor of the House without any discussion and debate. When you are meeting only 45 days, where the question of discussions and debates? Parliament is meeting only to pass the bills. That is what the government believes is the role of the Parliament. Even you can see that our Parliament is again meeting in a few days' time. I think 29th onwards the Parliament will be meeting. The government has said that what is the agenda of the government? To get at least 25 bills passed. Discussion? Who cares? Debates? Who is bothered? The government says that their objective is to only get the bills passed because they have majority on the floor of the House. Once the bills are passed, immediately the House will be adjourned, Senate. Because that is what they don't want, any kind of discussions or debates on the floor of the House. And that is where the problem is with our Parliament. When the number of days it is meeting is coming down, automatically its effectiveness also goes down drastically. And that is where the problem with our Parliament. Next, another problem with our Parliament is tendency to pass bills without any discussion or debate on the floor of the House. This is where another problem is. Since 2019, that is what we say. Since 2019, when the government got majority on the floor of the House in both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, when they got majority on the floor of the House in both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha since 2019, what we have witnessed is a strange, unfortunate reality that all those bills were passed most of the time without any discussion and debate. The government used its brute majority on the floor of the House to get them passed. Not even a single bill was referred to the Select Committee of the Parliament. Again, today the government has said that they wanted to get around 25 bills passed in Parliament. And they never said that they wanted the discussion and debate on those bills. The government believes that they have majority on the floor of the House. So why should they discuss and debate also? Take the case of farm bills, which the government was forced to repeal also. What was the argument? What was the argument of the central government when the bills were passed? They said that people had given them 300 MPs in Lok Sabha. They said that that means people had given them the mandate. They don't have to take into consideration what the opposition are saying because they have the mandate of the people. And that is the reason why they will not allow any kind of discussion or debate on the floor of the House. For example, in Rajya Sabha, these form bills were passed in exactly 2 minutes time. Yeah, I repeat, 2 minutes time, without any discussion and debate. What did the chairman do? Chairman had thrown out all the opposition MPs for so-called unruly behavior on the floor of the house. All of them were sent outside the house. Marshals had come and marshals had lifted these members. And after that, when there was no opposition present, when there was no opposition present, what did they do? Then the speaker or the chairman had asked the minister to move the bill, and it was passed in exactly 2 minutes time. That is how our parliament functions. Why? As I said, the basic issue here is we don't have democratic traditions and customs. You can have democratic structures, but what is required is you need those democratic traditions and customs. We have not imbibed those democratic traditions and customs. All our rulers at the end of the day have that feudal mentality, dictatorial tendencies. Especially whenever the country had a charismatic person becoming the prime minister, that person will not tolerate any kind of dissidence, will not tolerate any kind of opposition. And they believe that any kind of opposition to their leadership is nothing but anti-national. And that is the reason why they will not allow any discussion or debate on the floor of the house. They will not bother about they will not bother about having any meaningful discussion and debate on the floor of the house. They think that the people have given them the mandate to function without taking into consideration uh, the views and opinions of the opposition. This is where again the problem is. Next one is Gallatin. The basic problem here with this the Gallatin is that all the budgetary discussions, budgetary demand for grants of ministries and departments, they are passed without any discussion or debate on the floor of the house. To give you example here, the first budget of independent India, which was around 1750 crores, it was discussed by Parliament for 45 days before it was given approval by our members. Whereas in 2012 and 13, and recently the present budget also, the present budget is 37 lakh crores. 37 lakh crores of rupees of budget was given approval by Parliament without any discussion and debate. The Speaker had guillotined all the demand for grants. In 2012 and 13, the budget was passed in exactly 2 minutes time without discussion and debate. That is where the problem with our functioning of our parliament. They simply are not bothered. So much amount of taxpayers' money is given approval without any accountability. They don't discuss, they don't debate, they don't do anything. Why? Because we have not imbibed those democratic values. This is where again the problem is. What is the reason why this kind of problems are occurring? What is the reason why these kind of problems are occurring? Why these kind of problems are occurring? Because of the next point: criminalization of politics and politicization of crime. This is where the problem is: criminalization of politics and politicization of crime. The country witnessed this criminalization of politics and politicization of crime, especially from 1960s onwards. Right? Now, what is the problem here? The problem here is that by late 1960s, political parties had realized that they simply cannot win elections on the basis of what we call performance. Why? Because people have realized that political parties are not at all sincere or honest with their efforts. They realize that these political parties are only interested in uh, making money, and also enjoying power. So that is when political parties started taking the help of criminals to win elections. At some point of time, these criminals, instead of helping the political parties, joined politics. They used crime as a weapon to enter into politics and also to enjoy positions of power. Initially, they had become part of a legislature. Later, they also entered into executive. If you look at present Lok Sabha itself, more than 43% of MPs have criminal records against them. Some of them are very serious criminal records also. For example, the Minister of State, for whom the Deputy Minister of State, he himself has a criminal records against him. He has an FIR against him in Uttar Pradesh for killing a person, and he can be, if it is proved, he can be awarded a death sentence also under Section 302. This is about the MOS home. You can imagine about others. When recently our Prime Minister expanded his council of ministers, on the floor of the House, he was very effusive in his praise of the council of ministers. He said that there are so many of them who are from OBCs, there are so many who are the women, there are so many of them who are from scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. What he did not mention was that more than 50% of the ministers also had criminal records against them. This is where the problem with our parliament. Why? Because at the end of the day, the quality of legislature is the one that really determines the quality of executive. If 43% of your MPs have criminal records, automatically 50% of your ministers will be having criminal records also. This is where the problem is. This is where the problem is. That is the reason why, as we say, this criminalization of politics and politicization of crime is also a major issue that is coming in the way of the effective functioning of our legislature. Criminalization of politics and politicization of crime. Then, what are the other problems? Next problem is ordinances. The executive has a tendency to issue ordinances to bypass the legislature. These ordinances are completely what we call anti-democratic. Why? Because in a parliamentary democracy, we say that every bill should be discussed and debated and voted upon before it is implemented, before it becomes a law. But these ordinances goes against the spirit of democracy. Why? Because these ordinances are issued by the President on the basis of the recommendations of Council of Ministers. When they are issued by the President, these ordinances, they are never discussed and debated, but they become law and the government implements them also. For example, last year during the Corona crisis, when the entire country was dealing with this Corona crisis last year, when it was looking into this Corona crisis, the government had come out with so many ordinances, including the farm bills, right? And the president could have asked the government to wait and take the parliamentary route so that they would have authenticity. But that was not the case. In the last 7 years, in spite of the fact that the government has a majority on the floor of the House, every year the government had issued maximum number of ordinances, which again defeats the very purpose of what we call parliamentary democracy. Very purpose of parliamentary democracy. Next problem that we see here is in the functioning of our parliamentary democracy is next problem is this right. Next problem is anti-defection law. As we have discussed earlier also, this anti-defection law has been misused and abused by successive governments, both at the central as well as at the state level. They have used this anti-defection law. They have used this anti-defection law to control, regulate the activities of opposition MLAs and opposition MPs, right? To control, right? That is why, you know, and that is the reason why we say that this anti-defection law has resulted in more defections than preventing defections. That is where the problem with anti-defection law. It resulted in more defections than in preventing any kind of defections. And every government at the center as well as in the state has promoted these defections from political parties because Speaker has absolute powers in terms of deciding these defections. And unfortunately, as we know, unfortunately, as we know, the Speaker is never impartial or unbiased. The Speaker is never impartial and unbiased, right? So the question here is that uh, more often than not, every speaker, whether it is the central or at the state level, has used anti-defection law to benefit the ruling political party, either at the central level as at the state level. And we are yet to come out with a solution because there is no commitment on the part of the political executive to come out with solutions to these kind of critical problems. Every political party benefits out of it. Every political party benefits out of it. This is why, and this has resulted in what we call ineffective functioning of parliamentary democracy. Why? Because you are speaking against the government. You are a member of parliament, and you are a member of parliament, and you are you are a member of parliament, and you are asked to vote on the floor of the house. You are asked to speak on the floor of the house. Then what happens? If you speak against the bill, or if you vote against the bill, immediately you will be disqualified using anti-defection law. This anti-defection law has taken away what we call inner party democracy in the political parties. Why? Because the moment you do or you say something against a political party, you will be immediately disqualified. This is where the problem is. It has made the political parties nothing but an extension of feudal families. If you take the case of Congress party, you cannot criticize the Nehru Gandhi family oriented parties. If you take the case of BJP, you cannot speak against the government. That is where the problem is. Then continuing with this, another problem is privileges of members of parliament. These members of parliament were asked to define their own privileges by our constitutional forefathers. Initially, they defined the privileges in the form of the speaker's authority to run the house. Whatever the members of parliament could do on the floor of the house cannot be questioned in a court of law. They can discuss, they can debate, they can speak, and they can vote on the floor of the house. It cannot be questioned in a court of law. Why? Because they needed that kind of freedom to function in an unbiased and impartial manner. If you criticize Supreme Court judgments or if you criticize the judges outside the house, it can be called contempt of court. If you do the same thing inside the house, it is called the business of the house. Judiciary cannot do anything. This kind of freedom is always required. And the parliament has been given the freedom to publish any material related to its proceedings. And it was decided that the parliamentarians will define their privileges later. This was in 1950. We are in 2021. 71 years have passed, but our members of parliament did not find time to define their privileges. And what is the outcome? The outcome is that it resulted in a huge amount of misuse of these privileges. In the JMM bribery case, it was proved that they had taken bribes to vote in favor of Congress party on the floor of the house. It was proved in the Supreme Court, but the judiciary could not do anything. Why? Because whatever they do on the floor of the house cannot be questioned in a court of law. That resulted in massive levels of corruption in the political system. And members of parliament, you can see at the state level, you can see them beating each other using all kinds of weapons and physically hurting other people. Nothing was wrong. We had a member of parliament in 2014 who used a pepper spray. He had thrown pepper spray into the eyes of the speaker and the prime minister and everyone else. Nothing could be done because privileges of members of parliament, they are never defined. This makes Indian Parliament one of the most unruly legislatures in the world. Of course, the less we talk about our state legislatures, the better. And next problem with our parliamentary democracy is ineffectiveness of these parliamentary committees. Again, these parliamentary committees are a continuation of the legacy of this British parliamentary system. So what it is being said is that this parliamentary committees will have to function efficiently when the parliament is not in session. They should meet, they should discuss, they should debate, they should come out with the solutions. They should also ensure accountability of the executive with the committees like Public Accounts Committee, Estimates Committee, Committee on Public Sector Enterprises, department related committees, so on and so forth. All those committees are there. But what is the outcome? Outcome is far from effective. These parliamentary committees simply have failed in performing their functions. So many reasons. First and foremost, when the executive does not give importance to legislature, parliament, where is the question of executive giving importance to parliamentary committees? That is what we have to remember here. When the government is not at all willing to give importance to the parliament, where is the question of the government giving importance to the parliamentary committees? These committee meetings are held only for the sake of meeting. Most of the time, they don't have the time to also discuss and debate. They simply uh, they simply what we call they simply repeat the recommendations of the previous committees because these recommendations are never discussed. They are never discussed on the floor of the house. And since most of the recommendations are advisory in nature, they also simply government also never take them seriously. And these committee meetings are also highly politicized. Those members of ruling political party in the committees will always support the government. Those who are from opposition will always criticize the government. So, in the functioning of these committees also, what we can witness here is that there is a complete division, vertical division in the functioning of these parliamentary committees. Our members of parliament still have not learned the art of ensuring the accountability of executive by forgetting foregoing their party differences. That is where the problem is. Please remember, all these instruments are very, very effective in United Kingdom. From where we have received, from where we have derived all these practices. But as I said, the basic problem here is we have not cultivated the values, traditions, and customs that can ensure effective functioning of our parliamentary democracy. So let us briefly go through what are the reforms. What are the reforms? As you can see on your screen, what are the reforms that needs to be implemented to ensure effective functioning of our parliament? What are the reforms? First and foremost, the functioning of our parliament is directly related to the quality of the members. When we are electing lawbreakers, when lawbreakers become lawmakers, as we say, rule of law is the first casualty. There will not be any rule of law. There will not be any constitutional law. And this is where the problem is. So, if at all we have to talk about parliamentary democracy and ensuring effective functioning of parliamentary democracy, we must start with the electoral reforms. We should get rid of all the criminals. If a country of 1.4 billion people, it is a travesty of justice if a country of 1.4 billion people cannot find 800 clean, committed, honest politicians to become members of legislature. It speaks very sadly about the state of affairs of our political system. So we have to be ruthless in terms of eliminating these criminals from politics, those who are indulging corrupt activities, those who are causing harm to the state exchequer, those who are using a crime as an instrument to win elections and retain power, those who are dividing the society in the name of religion and caste to win elections, those who have serious criminal backgrounds. We must get rid of them. What is the solution? Simple solution. Please remember, people believe that the system is so complex that we cannot find solutions. Solutions are very simple. We can have a separate fast track courts set up by the Supreme Court, headed by former judges, retired judges, and they can be given a mandate to come out with a judgment in all those cases involving those criminals or those parliamentarians against whom they have serious criminal records. As I said, in the current parliament, 43% of them have criminal records. All those 43% members, their cases should be investigated by the special fast track courts, and the time limit can be around 1 year. If they are convicted, then immediately they should be disqualified under RPA, Representation of People's Act 1951, and they should be disqualified for life, not for a period of 60 years. That is not required because we simply don't require those criminals in our electoral system, in our political system. We need to supply that for. Let a new generation of young people come into politics with commitment to public service. It is high time that we get rid of this garbage in the form of these politicians who are there in the politics only to for their selfish interest. We must implement these electoral reforms. Once we implement the electoral reforms, automatically what we can say here is we are automatically making sure that the quality of our legislature is comparable to the quality of the legislatures of other major democracies in the world. What is the difference? In other countries around the world, you don't find so many criminals being part of parliament. On the other hand, what we are doing here? On the other hand, what we are doing here is that we are constructing a new parliament building, Central Vista project. And what is the point of having a new parliament building? What is the point of having a new parliament building when the members inside the house have so many criminal records? Just by constructing a new parliament building, you will not be changing the entire face of our parliamentary democracy. Except that you are spending money of the exchequer, the government. Beyond that, you are not doing anything else. Beyond that, you are not doing anything else. You are spending the money of the taxpayers. Beyond that, you are not doing anything else. So that is the reason why, instead of having a swanky office for our parliamentarians in the form of a new parliament building, what should we focus in the 75th year of our independence to clean our political system, to get our political system rid of all these criminals? Very important. Next important reform, as we studied, is depoliticization of the office of speaker. We must make sure that this office of speaker is completely depoliticized. Unfortunately, from 1960s onwards, this office of speaker had become highly politicized. The ruling political party will always select a MP who is extremely loyal to the chief prime minister as a speaker, and he or she would make sure that their basic agenda is to protect the government on the floor of the house. Whenever the government is on a sticky wicket on the floor of the house, immediately they will adjourn the house. Whenever the government is facing a threat to its existence on the floor of the house, they will come to the rescue of the government by what we call by you know removing or by disqualifying all the MPs or MLAs. And this deep politicization of the office of Speaker is the sad reality of our parliamentary democracy. What should we do? As we said, once a person becomes a speaker, he or she should resign from the office or from the political party so that they can ensure impartial and unbiased function. They should not participate in the activities of the political party. They should not openly speak on political issues, and they should ensure level playing field. As we have said, this is the difference between the parliamentary democracy of United Kingdom and India. There, the speaker is highly impartial and unbiased. You don't expect them to do anything else than being impartial and unbiased. And that is the reason why we also need the same for India also. Next important reform is removing Gallatin. This Gallatin goes against the spirit of parliamentary democracy. Every demand for grant of every ministry should be discussed and debated on the floor of the House before it is being voted on the floor of the House. There cannot be any shortcut here. The governments simply, cannot use this shortcut and forget the legislature. Yes, remove Gallatin from the procedures of our Lok Sabha. Let there be not be any Gallatin. Budget should not be passed until and unless the demand for the grants of all the 54 ministries of Government of India are discussed on the floor of the House. Let the members of Parliament have discipline, have this culture of hard work. Remove this skeleton. This is what another important reform that we talk about here. And the amendments to Anti-Defection Law. The power to decide defections should not be with the speakers because it has yes, yeah, yes, you can use various committees to discuss the demands, but current it is better that they are discussed on the floor of the House rather than on the committees, right? Let the people also hear about what the members have to say about the demand for grants of each and every ministry, because these parliamentary committees, they function in camera. We don't know what they are saying. As the voters, we have the right to know what our members are saying on the floor of the House, right? So, and amendments to Anti-Defection Law. This Anti-Defection Law has resulted in more defections than in preventing those defections. That is the reason why, what is required here is that the power to decide defections should be taken away from the speaker. The problem is that even if we are giving it to the president or the governor, they are also highly politicized. The offices of governors as well as presidents are also highly politicized. That is the reason why what can be done here is that once a person decides to defect, he should automatically lose his membership and can be allowed to contest elections. Can be allowed to contest elections within the existing state assembly or within the existing Lok Sabha. So that there is no freedom, there is no discretion on the part of the speakers, because this Anti-Defection Law was framed by making the assumption that the speaker would be completely unbiased, which is not the case. So we cannot depend on this Anti-Defection Law to ensure the effective functioning of our speakers. Definitely, we need changes. And another thing is that these members of parliament, they must be the role models for others. They should define their own privileges. Obviously, taking bribes and voting on the floor of the House in a particular manner cannot be part of their privileges. Right to bribe cannot be part of your privilege in any country in the world except in India. Right to take bribes is part of their privileges. This kind of things happens only in democracy like parliamentary democracy like India. That is the reason why people say that India has a banana republic. Right? This is where the problem. We are what we are doing is that we are you know, making this corruption systematic in nature. And whenever a government is facing no confidence motion, it will buy the MPs, it will buy the MLAs, give money to them. Any amount of money, 50 crores, 100 crores, any amount of money, 20 crores, any amount of money, give it to them. In the process, making a mockery of democracy. So taking bribes and voting on the floor of the house cannot be part of their privileges. The moment they are changing sides, automatically they should lose their membership so that there is no incentive for them to change sides. We can remove this, eliminate this systematic corruption. Next, when it comes to ordinances, you know, as I gave you the example here, we need an activist president here. The President of India during the Corona times could have asked the Prime Minister wait for the Parliament to meet because these these agrarian reform bills, farm bills need discussion and debate on the floor of the House before it is being implemented. It is such a significant reform. And what happened? Without any discussion and debate, the ordinance was issued. And again, without any discussion and debate, it was passed on the floor of the House. Finally, the government had to eat humble pie and withdraw them. Had they followed democratic process, they could have implemented these reforms in a more efficient manner. For that, we must promote inner party democracy. Political parties should allow their members, right? Political parties can allow their members to express their opinions, express their views on all issues related to the country, instead of making them as nothing but what we call rubber stamps. And this is where the problem with our parliamentary democracy. We must promote inner party democracy. We should give freedom to the members to express their opinions and also participate constructively in discussions and debates. These are all some of the measures that can ensure what we call effective functioning of parliamentary democracy in India. I think the time is up. The time is up. Tomorrow evening, at the same time, we will come out with another topic in general studies. I am sure, I think tomorrow evening I will be taking up disaster management. Why disaster management is not successful in India and what can be done at the same time. And you will come to know about this topic, we'll put it in our Telegram group also. So tomorrow at evening 5 o'clock, I will be doing, I am sure, disaster management. Till then, take care of yourself and best of luck.